shooting the shit. So we're having I'm having horrendous Wi-Fi issues. So there's no Wi-Fi in Bear Cup apparently. So if it goes down, it's all my fault. Anyway, hi girls, how are you?
Hi.
I'm not allowed to call us girls, am I? It's demeaning.
Ladies, if you do not to be minding.
Oh goodness me, no, I refuse to use the word ladies. Even Leon knows not to call me a lady.
Hey ladies.
Yeah.
Just before we get started, I was just having a look at a wonderful website called Mama Bear, Mama-Bear, Mama with one M, well, two M's, not three M's. That sells wonderful marmalade made by Marisha.
Yay! I've ordered lots
lots
of marmalade. Literally everyone I know is getting marmalade for Christmas.
Yeah, girl, that's it, man.
I love it.
It's the best marmalade. Anyway, we're not here to talk about marmalade, much as we would like to. Isn't marmalade an awesome word?
Yeah. Marmalade, yeah.
Marmalade.
Sounding, isn't it? It's like if you could be middle class in English, you would say marmalade.
Marmalade. Lady marmalade.
Marmalade. Yeah. Anyway, should we move on?
Yes. Anyway, not here to talk about marmalade. We are here today to talk about muffs. Mary Wollstonecraft.
No, we're not. No, we're not.
Well, we're going to touch upon that anyway. Literally,
we're going to touch upon the muffs. Rachel.
Yeah.
No.
Muff touching. Okay, sorry. I'll be very serious. We're here to talk about statues, feminism, and statues. So, the reason that we are leading on to this, of course, is the fabulous Mary Wollstonecraft statue. Have you seen the statue, Marisha?
I've seen the statue. She's got a massive minge.
She has. There we go, you see. You see, at least I used an acceptable word, Hannah Weinhold. Like, minge is one of those words. It's like flange, isn't it? It's like.
I don't think it's bad as flange.
Have you seen the statue, Hannah Weinhold?
Yeah, I've seen the statue, and actually, I quite like it.
Do you?
Yeah.
I think it's fabulous. So let's just explain. So the statue is, if for anyone that doesn't know, it's called Mary on the Green. It's in London. It is a bronze statue. Apparently it's a silvered bronze statue. So it's bronze that's got silver, what do they call it, where the silver all sticks to it? That alloy or whatever, that stuff. Wow. Plated. Yeah, silver plated. It is apparently, it is like a melange of women in a fiery pit, all kind of fighting to get out and find form, and then it goes up in this like plume of unness, and at the top emerges not Mary Wollstonecraft, but an every woman, apparently an idealized every woman. It's made by Maggie Hambling, who is actually an awesome sculptress. So yeah, I do think it's an amazing statue. What do you think of it, Reese? Just in terms of, do you like it or do you not?
Do you know, I because I'm always bringing, the highbrow conversation into these calls. Well, there's two things, First off, I do quite like it actually, and I think for me it's something that it starts the conversation, and there's obviously been news on it and things like that, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but yeah, there's I think it's a very interesting piece, and it symbolizes what it's meant to, I guess, really, once you actually look into it and once you listen to why it exists, etc. On the flip side, it's like, why are statues so small these days? Like the pissing boy, right? It's about this big, isn't it? And like, and I expected this like massive woman on a stand, and it's kind of not.
Cuts, government cuts.
Big, but yeah. Anyway,
I mean, there is an element of damned if they do and damned if they don't, isn't there? Because on the other hand, I mean, I don't know if any of you've seen that there was a humongous, and by humongous, I mean fucking humongous, like the size of Buckingham Palace, golden dog that was unveiled in, I think, Kazakhstan or something last week to signify some ex-president and his magnificent dog. And you do kind of think like, all right, seriously, guys, have you not got anything better to spend all that money on? So there is an element of, you build a massive fucking statue made of silver and everyone goes, have we not got, we should be spending that money on the NHS. And then we build a tiny statue and everyone's going, I can't see the fucking statue.
Yeah, Marisha.
Yeah, you never
please me, people.
What do you want? A massive statue or a tiny statue? Make your
I
mind
want
up.
an in-between size statue that fits what exactly I want. Good grief.
Well, you are absolutely right. So there has been an awful lot of discussion around this statue, and to be honest, that is kind of what you want a statue to do, isn't it? I mean, it was on.
Well,
Have I got news for you?
Is it what you want a statue to do, or do you want a statue to memorialize and immortalize someone great?
Well, I mean, that's the very, very much the question that we are discussing today, really, isn't it? You said, Hannah, before that you'd done some research. Have you read the article in The Atlantic about the statue?
I've read many articles because I'm struggling to place how I feel about it. So as a piece of art, I very much like it. I love the concept of it. And I think it's beautifully executed. But as a kind of a monument to Mary Wollstonecraft, I understand people saying, why did she have to be naked? It's just further sexualizing women. It's further objectifying women, objectificating. This objectificating.
We're going to objectificate on this woman.
It's further objectifying women's, and I don't know. I do kind of see it from both sides. I'm not bothered by the bush, and I'm not bothered by like the size of it. I think as a statue, it's beautiful. I think as a monument to Mary Wollstonecraft, it's questionable because she was a great feminist and a great thinker and brave. And I suppose the statue is brave though, so maybe it does come full circle.
This is it. There was a who she was on the news, and she was saying, look, Mary Wollstonecraft was complex. In fact, she called her a hot mess. She said she was a hot mess of a woman. You know, she had all these great ideals, but then in her private life, she was a complete disaster, and she was having affairs left, right, and centre. I make no judgment on that. And you know, she tried to commit suicide several times. She had mental health issues. She had children out of wedlock, which obviously at the time was a big no-no. You know, I mean, by today's modern standards, she didn't do anything that all of us are particularly going through. But by the standards of the day she was living in, she broke the mold in terms of her thinking, but she broke the mold in terms of the way she lived her life as well. And so you kind of think, well, actually, that statue is a little bit of a hot mess. Maybe that does represent Mary Wollstonecraft. But then Maggie Hamblin herself said that it isn't every woman, and that's what she said. So you're right. I kind of think it's an amazing statue. It's an amazing statue to women and feminism. Is it a memorial to Mary Wollstonecraft?
Yeah, I think I read an article that was saying that it's the reaction to it is testimony to the complicated relationship between the public and public art. And like, without getting into like art theory, public art is always very difficult because you can't please everyone, and it can't be too literal, and it can't be too figurative. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it as a piece of art. I love it. But it is another tick in the column of statues of women. So I'm going to lay some facts on you now. My favorite fact. Yeah, I'm going to give you some facts. My favorite fact that I found out today. Did you know that there are more statues of animals in Edinburgh than there are of women? There are 0 statues of women in Edinburgh, and there are a couple of hundred of men and some animals. So now I will admit that the most up-to-date statistics I can find on statues is from 2018. But out of all the statues in Britain, there's 828, and 174 of them are women. So 1 in 5 statues in Britain is women. Pretty shit, right?
Mm.
And then we take out the named women. So not just I pick a nice woman. And there are 80 statues of named women in Britain. And then when you look at it in more detail,
take out the royal women.
Pardon?
Take out the royal women.
Take out the allegorical and mythical women.
Okay.
Of which there are 66.
Wow.
Yeah. So there are 0 female politicians in public spaces, whereas there are 65 male politicians. The fictional men, or the fictional male statues, of which there are 16, are soldiers on war memorials, whereas female figures, unnamed mythical figures, are nudes or nymphs. So again, we're sexualized, we're objectified, we're, mythical creatures. So yeah, them's my stat.
So yeah, apparently the statistic I heard is that same thing, that fewer than 3% of British statues are of named, i.e. an IRL woman who wasn't royal. Fewer than 3% of the statues. And so I was asking Leon, my 11-year-old barometer, before, and I said, "What do you think of female statues, Leon?" And he went, "Oh, I don't know." And I said, "Have you ever seen a statue of a woman?" And he went, "No, I don't think so." I said, "Have you seen a statue of a man?" He went, "Oh, yeah. I said, "Have you seen a statue of a horse?" He went, "Yeah, I have actually, yeah." I said, "Have you seen a statue of a dog?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "But have you seen a statue of a woman?" And he was like, "No, that's not right, is it?" And so it's right, I mean, I made a pilgrimage to see the statue of Millicent Fossa that's in Parliament Square, which is one of the few female statues I can identify. Reece, can you remember a statue of an actual woman that you've ever seen?
Yeah, because there's one in Leicester, in town, basically. So I can't. It's outside. I can't even remember where it is exactly. I'll have to look it up in a second. But yeah, there is one. So yeah, I think it's. My question there, I guess, is it would be about how old these statues are as well. So the one we're obviously talking about today is new, and I guess, by what we would think of as a statue it's literally a lifelike representation of that person. That's a memorial, that's what they look like, and that's why it exists, and that's why it was done. Has there been anything, what else is out there that's fairly recent, or is it that it's all just really old stuff?
Well, this is so the one about Millicent Fossa. It is Millicent Fossa. It's she's a Victorian lady. It is quite identifiably her. She's carrying a banner that says "Courage calls to courage everywhere." She's dressed, quite importantly, she's dressed in Victorian clothing. She's quite clearly got like a corset and a long skirt on. It is a very, very lifelike representation of her. Dali says that he thinks Thatcher has a statue now, so we can all go and have a little coven, meeting. Pankhurst on a chair. Yeah, no, he's right. Actually, Emmeline Pankhurst was revealed recently, but again, Reece, that's a tiny, tiny statue. Well, not a tiny. It's not like Lego sized, but in statue terms, it's quite small, isn't it? So I think there is a thing to think about in terms of size. But yeah, you're absolutely right. The statues of women are very, very new. They are the ones that we can think of. All of those have come about in the last 5 years, and I think that's probably because there was a concerted effort to say, "Hang on a minute, chaps, we need some bloody women here." This is a bit off, isn't it? But I don't know. Yeah, Hannah, can you remember seeing a statue of a woman IRL?
Yeah, there's a couple in Sheffield. Well, there's one in the centre of Sheffield of female steelworkers, but I think they have got a name, but that's new. And then there's an unnamed. There's a family, like a mother and a father, looking out over the river in Derry in Northern Ireland, but they're unnamed, representing the famine victims.
Right.
I found the one in Leicester. Oh, sorry.
Who is it?
It's an unnamed, basically. She's called the Leicester Seamstress, and it is an oldie fashioned lady, and it's to reflect the hosiery industry in Leicester.
All right. Okay. How old is it roughly?
1990.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So that's actually fairly old in terms of female statues, isn't it?
Yeah.
But again, it's an unnamed woman, and it's representing a particularly feminine art form, isn't it? Dali's pointed out that there is the Victoria Wood statue. So yeah, I haven't seen that in person, although my Sir Optimists went to see that on their trip last year to see it. I can't remember why I couldn't go, whatever the reason was. But anyway, yeah, I do think though, because we need to address the fact that she is naked, don't we? Joan Bakewell was on Have I Got News For You? I was telling Hannah this earlier. She was on Have I Got News For You on Friday, and they were talking about it. Victoria Coren Mitchell was saying something about, her pubic hair, and Joan Bakewell was like, well, that's what pubic hair looks like. Of course, that's what a normal bush looks like. Why does she need to be naked? So Maggie Hambling, the sculptor, has said that she is naked because clothes are restrictive, and clothes have been a particularly patriarchal means of restricting women for generations, and she wanted to represent a woman without the restriction of patriarchal clothing. And I completely and utterly get that. But then by the same token, we have, there's the whole thing about the male gaze and that women are just being objectified. How do we marry those two ideals? Reish, answer me, give me the answer.
I don't love it, God. No, I agree. I did read, what I read on it as well was also that obviously clothes date something, and the intention was for this to almost have no date. It doesn't matter when the woman is from, or what era or anything along those lines. So I get it from that perspective as well. But yeah, I think I think that's the whole question, really, isn't it? It's kind of, should she be, or is it just that it's an acceptance of the female form? Is it this? Is it that? There's so much more to it than black and white, I think, really. And almost to a personal feeling and standpoint about stuff. So I don't have the answer, but I think it's it kind of touches on what we were talking about last week, actually, in terms of starting a conversation or starting someone questioning why something exists. And if you're want to take yourself away and think, well, why does it look like that, or have a conversation about why it looks like that, then you may find out something new, or have a proper discussion about it, as opposed to taking it on face value, i.e. look at her tits, and yeah, you will get some obviously that are kind of like that, but I would like to, or hope to think, that people will kind of take it away, and actually, even if they don't say outright, or that they're going to look into it, that they do.
I mean, the article that I was reading, it was on The Atlantic. It's a very good article. The woman who wrote that said that she went down to see it, I think the day after the unveiling, and there were people, men and women and children, stood around the statue discussing it. And she was like, you don't get that. You just don't get that in Britain, that people stand around and talk about art. So the fact that it had instigate, I mean, as I say, it was on the BBC News, it was on Have I Got News For You, we are talking about it now. It has absolutely sparked debate, and surely that's a good thing. And Hannah, that's what art is for, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's not, so she's naked, but it's not sexual. It's not a sexual pose. If she was clothed, you can be fully clothed and more sexualized than that statue. She's not, suggestively draped in like a silky fabric or something like some of the, Greek and Roman statues. She's just
also, we live in the age of Pornhub, Hannah. If you are having to go and get your rocks off from a statue that looks like that, you seriously need a better broadband connection, don't you?
Maybe that's why. Maybe they've been to bake up. But, unapologetically standing in her most simplest form, representing women, and maybe the fact that she's naked, it is challenging the male gaze, like you say, kind of, if you're having to get your rocks off to that, then you need to get a grip. Maybe that's what it's about. It's our perception that sexualizing her, and female nudity doesn't, or why is female nudity always synonymous with sex? Male nudity isn't always synonymous with sex. It can be like used to represent vulnerability or strength or whatever. So by us linking it with the male gaze and sexualizing it, that's our internalized misogyny rather than the artist's intent.
And also it comes back, we have to bring it back to the point of, you know, Mary Wollstonecraft was a radical woman in all senses of the word. She was a radical woman. And, you know, if we'd have had a statue of her, like the Emmeline Pankhurst statue, like the Millicent Fossa statue, where she was all corseted up and standing very respectfully. And, you know, yes, she had a, you know, on a banner, on a chair, whatever. But they are very respectable Victorian women. They are clothed. They are corseted, you know, they are enclosed women in the acceptable form that we will allow statues of women. This is just a fucking in your face, here's my muff, I'm here to upset you statue of a woman. And you know, the more I think about it in those terms, the more I think, you know, maybe that is the most fitting thing for Mary Wollstonecraft.
Yeah, like even Emmeline Pankhurst is wearing a hat because female hair is disgusting, and you know, all over the world in all different religions and cultures, female hair is made to be, well, male hair shaved, covered up, it's shameful, it's repulsive, it's not holy, or it's too holy and you're only allowed to share it with God, or there's so much tied up in hair and hats and head coverings, isn't there? So does that statue of Mary Wollstonecraft, what's the hair like? It's shorn,
she's
isn't
got
it?
short, yeah, very. And again, that's quite a subversive thing, because women in those days were expected to have long hair. You know, it was almost, it was a sign of wealth, because you had hair long, and if you had a maid, you had somebody who could do your hair nicely. Whereas, you know, washer women and char women just had it kind of curled up on their head. So again, hair is a status symbol as much as anything else, and she's got a practically shaved head, or very, very short hair. What do you think, Rish?
I think it's you know, I think I'm just thinking about, you know, public art and stuff like that, and I think the you know, most exposure, for want of a better term, I have at the moment is, you know, like things like the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, for example. And I think if you know, I think about that, and, you know, the types of arts and, you know, sculptures and things that are there, and actually, you know, this type of art, in terms of it being more modern, in terms of it being, you know, this, that, and the other, it exists, but it's almost like it's kind of contained, you know. So it's, you know, whereas this statue we're talking about now, it's there, you know, it's in town, it's there for everybody to see and everybody to talk about. I think that's a really interesting thing as well, because it's you know, again, everything about it is essentially, you know, starting a debate. You know, literally every single thing about it, even to where it is, you know, kind of leans to that as well, which I think is, you know, incredible, really, isn't it, for a piece of stone and a bit of metal? It's a very interesting thing.
It is.
I'm
it is.
sad that it's been so hated by people, journalists and
some quite respected people, you know, respected feminists. Caitlin Moran, for example, was one of the first people to be against it, wasn't she? And, you know, and these are women whose opinions I appreciate. And I, by the same token, I'm saying that, and I still can understand where they're coming from. They were saying, you know, we wanted, even I think Simon Sharma said, I've been desperate for a statue of Mary Wollstonecraft for years, but this isn't it. And I think that's at the nub of it, isn't it? I think had they just said, we want a statue to feminism, here it is, people would have gone, oh my God, that's amazing, that's brilliant. But because they said it's a statue of Mary Wollstonecraft, and then Maggie Hambling's come out and said, no, it's not Mary Wollstonecraft, it's for Mary Wollstonecraft, it's not of Mary Wollstonecraft. I think that's the bit that's upset people, isn't it?
Yeah, because again, it's not kind of immortalizing Mary Wollstonecraft and celebrating her work and her influence. It's telling her what she needs, it's giving her a gift. It's not honouring her, really, is it? But then it is honouring her because we are here, able to have this open discourse and able to say we are feminists and able to work and able to, do everything that we do because of women like Mary Wollstonecraft, because of Mary Wollstonecraft, because of the vindication of the rights of women.
Yeah, there was a doctor, I can't remember her name now, but I've written the quote down. She said she's a lot weirder and ickier and more surreal than most people realise. And that statue, it is all of those things. It's weird and icky and surreal. So maybe it is a perfect representation of it. Do statues, generally speaking now, men, women, dogs, horses, do they need to be of the person, and do they need to be an exact replica of the person in order to represent them? And as I was saying that, I was thinking of that Cristiano Ronaldo statue. Have you seen that? Is it at Madrid Airport? That's the best statue ever. But I think they have removed that, haven't they? Because I think he complained. But do they? Why? Who says that a statue needs to be a very lifelike representation of somebody in order to commemorate them?
I mean, they were kind of a vanity thing, really, originally, weren't they? It was one step up from your portrait. And they weren't accurate representations of who they were supposed to be. They were more of a feeling, like the big one of Wenceslas in Prague. It's just kind of a suggestion of a person on a giant horse. That's a big one, Marisha.
I'm only going for big buds. I agree.
We've heard that about you, Ree.
Well, I can't deny it. But I'm nodding there, like, yes, I can't do what Jo does. My face doesn't give it away as much as she has. Like, yes, but it's I agree. It's almost like those, or what we see today is how that person was, if you like, when actually it was probably nothing like that, nowhere near that in any way, shape or form. They could have had half a leg for all we know, but actually they wanted to be remembered as with two legs, even though they never had one, or something ridiculous like that. So it's I think it's a weird thing, and I think that's this whole discussion really is because it doesn't look like them. And I think there is an assumption. If someone's going to say I'm going to make a statue of X, you automatically assume that that's what it's going to look like. And I think that's the upset, isn't it? They've got something in their head already that it's going to look like this and it's going to be this, and it's not.
There's that. Have you seen one of the biggest in fact, I think it might be the biggest statue in the world is of Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan or whatever his name is, and it's in the and I don't. I'm going to give my ignorant. It's absolutely huge. It's absolutely huge. In fact, it houses the base of the statue houses the Mongolian museum or something. So it's absolutely fucking huge. But it looks nothing. It looks like a little old Chinese granddad. It doesn't look anything like or what the representation. Genghis Khan supposedly was much more kind of of a slightly different origin, not a Chinese origin, wasn't he? So, genetically speaking, I've got the Monty Python song in my head now about how I like Chinese.
Rachel, no, move on, please.
Yeah. Google it. Google Monty Python. But anyway, apparently it looks nothing like him. It looks of the slightly, and the horse doesn't look like a horse. It's a very angular representation of a horse. But again, people don't go, I don't think he looks like that. We're not having this humongous, giant building-sized statue. And maybe the president of Turkmenistan's golden dog wasn't really gold and wasn't really 37 feet tall. So
I think this goes back though to the relationship between the public and public art. Public art is never successful because art is one thing and the public is another, and artists create something conceptual and it doesn't translate into public art because it's appreciating art and interpreting art is a skill. I'm not appreciating art. Interpreting art is a skill, and not everyone has that skill. And unless you've studied it, if you just pass something in the street and go, "Oh, a statue," or "Oh, a piece of public art," it's really difficult to it's really difficult to interpret it correctly or at all, or form your own opinion. And the art appreciation is contextual. And so that's why public art is like 9 times out of 10 not great. And I think that's possibly where it's falling down here, that there's an artist that's created something beautiful and conceptual and contextual, and it's not appreciated.
Do you not think like it must hurt your very soul, mustn't it, to think if if I was Maggie Hamblin and I had spent however long she has spent. I mean, this Mary on the Green statue has been, the campaign to have one has been going for near on 10 years, I think. And I think Maggie Hamblin's been doing the statue, doing her version for 2 or 3 at least. And do you not think you must just want to fucking smash everybody's face in when you spend that long working on something and you create something that is as beautiful and amazing as that statue is, and everyone goes, but it doesn't look like her.
Yeah, and I read an article where the journalist that had written it had gone to see it, and there happened to be 2 of the board members from the committee to commission and get this statue up, standing there looking at it, and they started distancing themselves from it, metaphorically, not physically. Backing away from it.
Walking away. Slowly, don't make eye contact.
And saying, well, it's not what we thought. And we're like, well, you fucking signed off on it, and you were talking about it from the beginning, and you commissioned it, and you commissioned the artist and everything, and then they were kind of distancing themselves. I want to move on. Can we talk about statues gone bad? So yes, when statues attack. So do you remember there was one of Jimmy Savile in a leisure centre?
Yeah.
So that is a perfect example, and because through all Black Lives Matter and stuff, it's really highlighted the fact that sometimes statues are of bad people, that not everyone who has a statue is a saint, and because the human condition is very complex and not everybody is pure. So but then there are people like Savile who are pure evil. So, but then he raised loads of money for charity. So what are you going to do? I'm not excusing Savile. I'm on a sticky wicket. Someone help me.
What was the podcast we were? Oh, it was Fortunately, wasn't it? I don't know if either of you listened to Fortunately, but last week they had an author on who had been in hospital. I don't know whether she had like polio or TB or some sort of childhood disease, and she was in hospital for quite a long time, very, very poorly. And Jimmy Savile came to visit her, and she woke up. She was like in and out of consciousnness. She woke up, Jimmy Savile was there, and then the nurse, because they thought she might stop breathing at any time, so she was under constant 24-hour surveillance from a nurse. And apparently all she can remember, she was about 6 or 7 at the time, she remembers the Jimmy Savile saying to the nurse, "It's all right, you can leave us, I'll look after her whilst I'm here." And the nurse was going, "You're like, no, I'm not, I can't leave her, I'm not leaving her." And he was like quite adamantly trying to get the nurse out, "I'll keep an eye on her, she'll be all right." And this nurse was adamant, and this woman was saying, "I don't know what that nurse's name was, I've never thought of her, but she probably saved me from something very, very horrific." And it was Unfortunately last week. Just go and listen to it. It was one of those moments where you're like, oh God, it just made you cringe. But yes, no, I mean, where do we stand on the people who in the Black Lives Matter protest where they took down that statue that was in Bristol? I mean, Reesh, what do you think about that?
There's all sorts, isn't there? That's it. I think again we kind of touched on this as well, and it's like I think it was last week, and it's a very do we judge everything today by today's standards, and it's again another really difficult and difficult one for me, really, because on one side you're like, well, things wouldn't be as they are without that person, whether you liked it or not, whether you agree with what they did or not. It is what it is, and they did what they did, and what has happened has happened. And hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? I say that all the time, literally. So it's when statues go bad, I was thinking like robotic.
Like on is it Doctor Who with the statues that do that?
Oh my God, that is petrifying, that one.
Yeah, that's really freaky.
So yeah, I don't know, but what do you do about it? Is it a case of chopping it down and throwing it in a river, or is there something else you can do about it? I don't really know, but yeah,
well, again, tricky, isn't it? I don't think some people do deserve to be immortalized, but then you think about historical figures, like with the Genghis Khan one. This is what made me think of it. Genghis Khan committed unbelievable atrocities and genocide, but was
rape. Lots and lots and lots of rape.
Yeah, but shaped the world and did phenomenal things.
Descended from him because of all the rape.
Well, most people descended from, like, we're all related if you go back far enough. So, like you can't erase that, and you need to know about these things because this is how the world came to be. And thinking about that slave trader in Bristol, whose name I don't remember, but and can't really be bothered to find out. Like Bristol was built on that trade and that money, and you can't erase it. But I also don't think you should memorialize it. Oh no, you should memorialize it. You shouldn't celebrate it.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? The thing is that, I mean, the Slavery Museum at Liverpool, if you've never been there, I thoroughly recommend you go because it is absolutely brilliant at not celebrating, but commemorating the slave trade and the actual reality of the slave trade. But we don't learn the reality of the slave trade in school in this country. We just don't. We get the whitewashed version of it, and those statues and the place names and the factories in Liverpool and everything that came from it, those are the only means we have of having those conversations. Like exactly like you say, the statues are there to spark conversations, and if they are not there, we are in serious danger of just brushing it all under the carpet and of never speaking about it. And then the truth of the slave trade and how everything that the British Empire was built on the backs of slaves, that never comes into the public consciousness. So yeah, maybe we need different statues. I don't know, maybe that statue should have been left up, but somebody should have put chains around it or put some manacles on its feet or something. But what worries me is that we have pulled a statue down and we haven't put another statue in its place, and that is then a silence rather than a conversation.
I mean, someone did go and put a doll of Jimmy Savile on it. Which, again, back to Jimmy Savile.
What, the Bristol one? They put a Jimmy Savile doll on there.
Yeah, as a joke, obviously. But then, but then, looking back at Savile, he did raise millions for charity, and that statue was put up before all the child sex allegations came out. And I don't know, it's complex, isn't it? It's you don't want a statue of Jimmy Savile up anywhere, but it's almost like a war memorial, like never again, like we will never let this happen again. And
I mean, this is exactly it, isn't it? Statues, we have in our minds, we have statues and we have memorials, and we don't tend to have statues of people as memorials. We tend to have obelisks or some sort of cross or something as a memorial. Yeah, and maybe this is maybe statues of people can be memorials. Although reach the one that you said in Leicester of the seamstress, and Hannah, the one from Belfast. Oh yeah, the one in Sheffield as well. In a way, yes, there are nameless people, but they are memorials, aren't they? They're memorials of the suffering of people. So it is possible, isn't it? It's possible to have statues,
isn't it? And that's the thing for me. It is a memory of something that happened, and I think I do agree with that, and I think I've quite frankly, I never thought about it in much depth, to be honest with you. But it's like when you say, "Do you know a female statue?" It's like only because I happened to walk past it. So therefore I read what was on it. Therefore I know what she did, or I can't remember if she had a name or anything. But it's there. Do you know what I mean? Because I've grown up, in a city that has one. So yeah, I do agree with that kind of, it's deeper. In terms of education and stuff like that, because there's so much that isn't taught or isn't talked about, isn't discussed, because we're ashamed of it all. But the reality is that it happened, and we are the result of that. Directly, indirectly, life, cities, everything, comes off the back of that, good or bad.
Well, the three of us are here because of slavery, directly because of the sugar plantations in the West Indies, and therefore our ancestors were part of the British Empire, and therefore they came to Britain in the 50s and 60s, and ergo we're here mixed race children but British. And that's exactly it. We literally wouldn't be here had that shit not happened. And yes, it was awful,
but we're not taught about it.
We're not taught
afterwards. You have to have that discussion somewhere else with something else, and it's never to be spoken of. It doesn't exist. And I look back at my surname, for example, and the story is that actually it's a misspelling of Reynolds, which essentially goes back to slave trade. Because there's not many that have the same spelling as me, so you can kind of find them all. But ultimately, it's like, well, but we all came from that same family, and it's all the link is the slave trade. It's as simple as that. But it takes for you to be a grown up to kind of have that discussion and kind of track it back, as opposed to it being a full discussion about how we are when you're a bit younger.
Well, I learned about the slave trade at school, and I know time is marching on. We are going to finish, but when I learned about it, the only thing I learned was, weren't the British amazing because we abolished slavery, and that was it. That was the story that we were given. We weren't told we started it. We weren't told we ran it for 300 years. We weren't told we abolished the transatlantic slave triangle, but we carried on running the sugar plantations in the Caribbean, that we started in taking indentured workers from the none of that. It was the very nice story of Mr. Wilberforce and the Great British Empire abolished slavery and did the world a favour. That's the story that you learn. And that's, it had, yes, these statues and everything that we have to these slave traders. This is why I kind of feel if we take them away, we're enabling that whitewashing and that silencing of that historical story to carry on, because we're just going to go, well, they weren't very nice, but just let's not talk about it.
I think it's that they're celebrated in statue form. I think that's the problem. I think museums, yes. Plaques, yes. Memorials, yes. Statues of baddies, no. Probably not, no. But I think I think what's good though is that in the last 10 years, 20 years, like history is being equalized. There's less like deletion of women's achievements. There's more female statues going up, as we've discussed, with all the suffragette statues and Thatcher and comedians, entertainers, politicians. It is changing, and I think it's just another symptom of women being written out of history. But I think it's safe to say that there are more statues of women going up, and women's achievements and impact on the world is being recognised.
Yeah, about bloody time. So, Rish, final word. Do you like the statue? Are you going to go and see it?
I'm not going to go out of my way to see it, but I appreciate it for what it is, and I do like it. Yeah, and I think the fact that we, have had a discussion about it, suggests that it's doing what it's supposed to do, and I kind of tap into that because there's since been another female statue go up in Leicester a couple of years ago that I've not been in Leicester for a few years, and the only reason I mention that is because I didn't know. It's too quiet, because it's as you would expect. Do you know what I mean? Of a suffragette, and she's wearing those clothes, and she's in bronze, and she's doing all the things that you expect from a statue, whereas this one means we have conversation and we talk about it. So I do like it.
You're absolutely right. Hannah,
Adam?
You like it?
Yeah, I like it. I would like to go and see it.
I'm going to go see it. I also appreciate what she's doing for the muff, because I'm fully on board with that. Bring back pubic hair.
You are sexualizing her there, really, aren't you?
No, I'm saying we should all bring back. I'm fed up of shaving and waxing and the rest of it. Yes, bloody patriarchy. If I want a muff, I'm going to have a muff. Anyway, on that note, we're off. That's enough for now.